Right, so I'll start off with the basic idea of how Sharperlight connects to various systems. In client setup, you can define your connections to the various systems. And you can see on my screen here, I've got the system connection, which is the Sharperlight database. That's where it stores reports and users and statistics and audit trails about what's happening on the system. So that's Sharperlight's database. And initially you just create a blank one and Sharperlight will automatically create the tables. And then under there, you can see I've got various systems on my laptop here, but in this list, you can see there's SAP Business One, there's Dynamics, and there's also Sun Systems. There's also a connection for Sun Systems 4. So these are called data models. So in here, we define the connection to Sun Systems, and we define a connection to the domain database.
Yeah.
You can also use database authentication or Windows authentication. If you use Windows authentication, there's a few extra things you need to be aware of when you start a service because it's using the current account. So these connections are done usually on what we call the application server. So you just have one application server, and the clients, what they do is they don't have a data model or connections to Sun. What the clients do is they have this remote connection. So in here, they just remote connect to whatever the application server is. And that connection can be over the internet as well. We can come back to it later.
Okay. So this view is only for the consultant, right?
Yes, just for setting up initially.
Not all the user.
No.
Okay. All right.
I'm just showing you behind the scenes how you connect. So all these connections have been done from the end user's point of view. Initially, most of them start in Excel. And after they've done Excel reports, at some point they may want to start sharing their reports and showing Excel's done reporting in Excel. The next logical step is to start doing reports in the web. So you get this sort of thing where you've got menus and then you've got reports coming back in the web. So that's the next logical step, and that's done through Publisher. So today's training, what we'll do is we'll start off with Excel, and then basically the same way you do reports, very similar, come into Publisher, and then you can start producing reports here as well. So for example, this sort of style of creating a menu, maybe doing a graph, and then then having transactions listed. All right.
So any report we design in the Excel, we can publish it on the web version.
Yes, most times you just take your queries and you publish them to the web. There's also the functionality to take Excel as it is and publish that as well to the web, but that's a little bit more advanced. The other item which I'll cover in today's training is the scheduler. And the idea there is that you want to do something every day or every week. So in here, I've got some scheduled tasks. And if I have a quick look at those, for example, I'm saving a report as PDF and then I'm emailing it, etc. So that'll be the other topic that we cover today about how to do scheduling and automation.
Okay. And the schedule can work also for uploading. Say if we upload a journal and we make a scheduler, is that work?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's lots of different actions, and one of them is called write back. So we could do a write back and automate write backs. So maybe you've got a CSV file or you've got something else. And also Excel does write back as well. Okay, so let's start with Excel. So up the top here, we've got a ribbon, and probably the most used items here are value. So value would get you, I'll just refresh this workbook. Okay, so there's a value. So we've got a balance, and you can see it's called MD value. And then the other one is table. If I come over to here, we've got a trial balance. So this is an Excel table. So they're the two main ones that you use. Sheet is a little bit more advanced. For a sheet, it's similar to table, but you can have like a subtotal, and you can have outlines, and you can have conditional formatting. Okay, we'll cover that later. So these two here are the main ones, and each time you define a query, you give a query a name. So I'll just have a look at the query here. So I'm just double clicking and edit, and here's what we call the query builder. I'll go into more detail about this, but each one of these queries has a name, and if we go to manager, you can see the names of the different queries. So here's age debtors. So if I have a look at the age debtor report, here we've got age debtors, and that's the query that does age debtors. So I can edit it here and see, okay, that's going to the ledger, and we've got 30, 60, 90 days. Or I can just double click on here and get to the query there. Right, so every query that you defined, you can find them under manager. And it's a good idea to give them good names like year to date, actual expense, and year to date revenue. And of course, if we looked at the profit and loss, so you can see that there's the name of the query, current actual expense, and there's our parameters. But the one under that uses the same query. It just has different cell references.
Okay.
So, Sharperlight support
yes.
auto calc.
Yes.
Automatically record.
Yes.
Sorry.
So if I change this to period 11, the numbers just changed.
Automatically recalculate.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Now you've got control over that. You can delay the calculation and put a recalc button on there. So there's more control over how the calculation happens. There's still things like drill down, so I can drill down to the transactions behind here. So that's a drill through, and then I can keep on drilling down right down to a single transaction. So I can keep on going. Let's have a look at how we build up queries. So I'll go to product sales. This is a very simple report. Let's have a look at how this query was made up. So I'm just going to click edit query, and what we'll do is I'll actually rebuild this on a new workbook on the site. Let me go to a new workbook. It's better if we start from scratch. All right, so we've got nothing at all.
Scratch. A new blank workbook.
Yeah. What I might do is just copy this section over here. This is a sample workbook that you can download, by the way. So I'm just going to put that over here, just so that we've got some parameters to feed our report. So I'm using PK2 and this period. So what I'll do is I'll put my report over here. I'm not worried about how it looks at this stage. So I come to the ribbon, and I want a table, so I'm not going to choose value. I'll choose table. Now, because I choose table, up the top here it says summary report. So that'll summarize the data. If I want transaction level details, I'll do detailed report. So in this case here, if I had an account and an amount, it'll sum the amount. If in this case here, there are no sums or counts. So generally, let's leave it on summary report. The next thing you do is you select the product. So you can see there's various ones in here. In your case, you'll probably just have system and Sun Systems. System being Sharperlight's content. So we go Sun Systems. Just over here is your license. You can see what license you've got. And now we come to our business unit. So if I select on here, we've got all the various business units. But in our case, we want to make it a cell reference. So what I'm going to do is just highlight that cell there and double click on cell B7. Did you see the cell reference there?
Yeah.
And over here, it says equals PK1. Next, I'll choose the tables. Yeah, the core ones are at the top, ledger and chart of accounts. And under here, we've got static, common, etc. So I'll choose ledger transactions. Now I've chose ledger transactions. Because we're on the ledger, there's a few mandatory filters. So they're the red ones on the top. Because we need to know what ledger, and it's a good idea to maybe provide a period or account code. So that's why they automatically appeared. I can put others up here by dragging and dropping them in there. So that's the filter area. Over here, we've got our outputs, and this is the selection. So we've got all the fields, and under these folders, like, for example, chart of accounts, we can find the account type, etc. Then keep on going down.
We can double click and drag it out to right there.
Yes.
So there is 2 ways. Yeah.
So we do something like that, and maybe I'll put out the period. So I can drag drop. I can also right click and output all. So let's just do a basic trial balance. So we've got period account like that. And if we preview this, so notice I didn't have to put it into Excel. I can preview it and play around without putting it back into Excel.
Nice.
All right, we can also drill from here as well and save it, etc. But I said that I wanted to do that products. So instead of doing this, what I'm going to do is I will go down to the analysis codes. So here's the analysis codes. And depending on what business unit you choose, the analysis code names will change. Probably they'll stay the same, but as you saw in that previous report, we've got the product code, and if I come into here, I can get the product name. All right, and preview. So there it is there. Just for this example, I want to exclude these two. So I don't want the hash in my report. So what I'll do is I'll take the analysis code, and what I can do is say not equal to hash. Right? It's not equal to hash.
Yeah.
Now it's gone. Also, I want to get rid of that blank one, so I'll just put another one in there. And it's interesting.
Equal to blank.
Yes. So if I said not equal to blank, let's see what happens. Because it's blank, it's hard to say what's a blank and what's left blank. So if I just come into options here, so these are the filter options. I'll just show you it again. I can come in here, options.
Not null.
And there's lots of options for the filter. And in here, we've got the operators. So we've got greater than, not equal. But there's also
not null.
So there's is blank. Yep. Not equal to. So if I said is blank, you can see it's got this keyword here. And if I did, for example, not equal to, it's exclamation mark equals, or not less than. See how it's not less than? So if I wanted not blank, I could just go not blank like this. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And there's also not null, etc. So I'm just showing you a special one. I think that's actually a null. Maybe that's a null. So I'll just change that to not null and see if I get it then. I think I know what it is. So I'm just showing you some of the more complicated filters already. So if we have a look at this here, I'll put this back to not blank. So what we have is not blank or not equal to hash. Really what we want here is to put brackets and say not equal to blank and not equal to hash. So by default, it's doing or. So are you following?
Oh, that's an or, not and.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's why.
So normally if you did like a count code, you could say 1000 and then or 2000 or 3000. So what I need to do here is just make this and. I'm going to come into here and say that's and I'm going to put brackets, closing brackets, and at the top I'll put opening bracket. So if we have a look here, it's not blank and not equal to hash bracket.
Okay.
Right? So there we go. We've got our report now.
Yeah. Okay.
So that looks better.
Yes.
And if we wanted to, we could also go into the SQL. So I'm going to have a look at the SQL statement, and you can see what it's doing.
We can review. We can review the syntax here.
So
very nice.
It's not blank and it's not hash, so we can see what it's doing under the hood.
Yeah.
All right. So I like that report now.
Right.
I'm going to press OK. Now here's where it says what is the name for this report. So I'm going to say products. Okay, that's the name.
Oh, this is the result. Okay.
When you give the query a name, you can see that the name appears in the formula, and the formula is just above the table. And the other parameter here is the name of the table object. So if I select this table and I go to, I think it's design, you can see the table name is called products as well. So this table is called products. I'll show you what I mean. So if I go equals and then select that, let's go that, you see how it's got products? So that's the name of that. All right, so we have a formula above the table. If you delete that formula, like it will, if I deleted this, I could still find the formula criteria in here. Yes, in the, so let me just show you. I'll delete this and I'll delete the table. So it's all gone. And if I come back to manager, I can still find it and then drag and drop it here, and it's back again. All right. And there's our cell reference. All right. So what we'll do now is we'll fix up these labels and fix up this formatting and parameterize the period. All right. So what I'll do now is double click here. So there's our query. I want the period to come from here. So I'll just double click. So B8. And I'd like to change the name of this output. I'll call, so I'm right clicking, change description. So I'll call that product. This will be name.
Product name.
Yep. Product name. And then I'll just call that amount. So press OK. And it's refreshed that table and changed the labels. So now I've got the report parameterized. What I can do is come over to the parameters and I can double click on the parameter. And when you do that, Sharperlight knows that this cell drives a report, so it brings up a lookup for you. Okay, so FLY and FS1, they both have data for 2014. If I did this, what do you think it would do?
The combination, the consolidation.
Yes. So have a look.
Aggregate.
So have a look at the numbers now. 37. And if I combine the two together, I almost get double the amount. That's combined both business units. Now, if we wanted to see which business unit the product belonged to, let's go back and edit the query.
And show the business unit.
Yes. Now, the business unit doesn't appear in this list here because we selected the table ledgers, but it is up here. So what we'll do is drag and drop the business unit down here.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So it shows,
So if I preview this, now we got Fly and FS1.
Yeah.
So now it's separate between business units, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've changed the columns. So previously there were 3, and now there are 4 columns. So when I press OK now, it just says, well, the table only has 3 columns. You've got 4 columns now. So it says I have to rebuild the table. You may have to redo your formatting if I do that. So just say yes, and it rebuilds the table. Okay, so now we've got our business unit product now out. For the formatting, you think, well, maybe I have to do the formatting for the amount in Query Builder. So if I look at the options here, there's a formatting tab. But you can see in red here, it says, look, if you're using Excel tables, and Excel does the formatting. So don't use this because we need to do that in Excel. Yeah, so I select that and I come up to here and
format cell,
like that. All right, so that's done. So the next question I get asked is if you refresh the table, will the formatting disappear? So if I do that, the answer is no, the formatting stays.
Ivan, what happened if we click no when the Sharperlight asks you to rebuild the report?
You'll be missing the extra columns you put in. So you always say yes. So when you say yes and it rebuilds the table, you may lose this formatting here, but that's okay because you're designing the report, so you may have to do that again. But now you've got the report, that formatting will stay. So the next thing I'd like to do is just demonstrate how you can do calculations. So we'll come back in here. Now, if I wanted to do a calculation, there's something called expressions. So I can do calculations and things like ranking and if statements, all sorts of complicated expressions that you define. For example, if I just want to multiply this by 10%, I would do something like this. I'd go add expression. And down here, we've got all the different types of functions and if statements. But here's the current row. So I can say times 0.1. And up here is the result is a decimal. And so then I say yes, and then say maybe tax. Okay. Let's just fix that up. I had an error. Oh, that's business unit. Okay, so it's not the business unit, it's amount times 0.1. So there's that calculation. And then if I want to do some sort of ranking, let's say that, A, B, C, depending on the amount. So if the amount was less than 10, then it's C, B, and maybe A. So let's do something like that. So So what I can do is I can do, if I do a search here, I can do it if. So if condition. And then we have also a switch statement. So we can do complicated. So here we've got some value and we're doing a match, but I'm just going to quickly do one for you. So which one is true? So let's do something like if the base amount is less than 10,000, then it's A. If the base amount is less than 20,000, it's B. If it's less than 30, it's C. And then you can see there's a default there. So otherwise it's D.
This is an if condition, right?
Yes. And we can do things like and or. So, all right. So this is the result of this is text. So I'm just going to set that to text, and let's have a look at that again. So now we've got some sort of ranking there. And
wow, very nice.
That rank. So there's lots of things you can do with expressions, but so now we've got that. Now you may be curious, well, because this is a table, everything that you normally do in Excel applies. So we can do a chart, we can do a bit of a table, stuff like that. So if you look at the original example, that was simply binding the table to a chart. So if you get the selection areas right, so here he's used the this area here and the amounts, and of course if we change, change the period, the chart will change as well. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you, is that pivot tables and charts can write off the pivot.
So if you change the value, the chart will automatically update as well, right?
Yes, which I just did. You watch the chart. I'm going to enter now.
Very nice.
It just changed.
Okay.
So do we have any questions so far with tables?
Okay, my question is, if we insert a column here, let's say in B, sorry, what is it, F, let's say if we insert a column in F, will it amend the structure?
All right, so have a look at the formula. So the formula has cell references. So if I insert a column here, you can see that those cell references are automatically adjusted. If I insert a row, again, Excel adjusts the formula, so it still works. And if I insert here, this inserted a extra column into the table, and that's not a good idea because this doesn't have an entry for that extra column. So I wouldn't insert in the middle of the table. Just keep in mind that Excel does the adjustments, and so as long as these are the right type of cell reference, they automatically get adjusted. So what I normally do for reports is, especially for complicated ones, maybe you've got lots and lots of sheets, and on the first sheet you've got something like this, parameters on the first sheet. So what I normally do with that is I would come into here and give that a name range and say company, and this will be and this one will be current period. So this is best practices, and then in here what you would do is you would say that the cell reference for the business unit is this one here, like that. You see here now it says company, right? So it knows it has a name range. And if I did these ones here, current period, current period.
Yeah.
So it uses the name range over the cell references. They should be used when you do cross-sheet referencing. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is do some drill downs. So here, if I double click on the report, you can see it's got drill down summary, drill down detail. So at the moment, I haven't defined a drill. So we can define one and have one in here saying show journal details or something like that. But until we define it, we just get the generic menu. So I'll select that. And because we haven't defined anything, it is asking us, well, what do you want to see? Depending on what I select, it will show you just the items that you selected. Now, if we want to predefine a drill, we would come into here and we'd edit the query. And on menu here, there's something called drill through. And then we can define that every time we click on this report, what we want to drill through to. So I'll just give you an example of one. I'll go back to the report here. So you can see that Donald, who did this report, has already predefined a drill called by period. So if we have a look how he did that, so we'll just edit the query. So you went in here, drill through, and once you've done a drill through, a button appears here as well. So there's his drill. So basically you define the same query again, and usually what you do is add more details. So what I'll do is I'll just add another one for this example. I'm going to add another one, new drill, and I edit the query. And what the query will do is it will start where the parent query, with the parent query details. So we had product name to date. So it's just mirrored that copy. So what we could do here is we could add some more fields. So maybe just for this example, I'll add the account code, the description. Because we want it to drill down or take the details from the row that we were on, if we were to drill on the product, what we want it to be in this list here is the current product that they've selected. So in this drop down here for the filter, I'm going to say, let's use the product code on the row. So this list here is basically the percentages are the output values and the @ symbols are the filter values of the parent. So we want to make it the same product code as what's on the row. So let's just say that's this, whatever row we're on, we want to use the same product code for this product. So I'm just going to press OK, close and close. And let's have a look at the drill options now. So now we've got this new one. So this is the one that Donald did. So he's got account and base amount. And if I select this row P02, we're going to use that product code for the filter criteria. So let's have a look and see if that worked. Drill. If I got the filter criteria right, we should see the same value. Now, I went through this rather quick, but there was a video on it. But basically, when you do a drill, you can decide what filter values should be passed across. So for this drill, we said it's got to be the same business unit, and it's got to be the same product, and it's got to be the same period. So if you're drilling down on transactions, let's find another example. So maybe a trial balance. Let's see if there's something here. No, there's no drills there. Oh, 2 transactions. Okay, so here's one. And same principle, but it's probably using the same business unit, same period, and then getting the accounts off here. So this is a drill to transactions. Now the key is whenever you're doing drills like this, just make sure that if your filter criteria is matching up, you'll get the same balance. Right, so if I go to this value,
should be the same balance, yeah.
Yep. Now, when I did the drills here, I did 2 transactions, but there's also a 2 transaction sheet, right? So what that means is that I've got a choice. I can put it in a window or I can put it into a new sheet. So I'll just select that.
Oh.
All right.
All right.
And what Sharperlight will do is create a report for you.
So this will be another individual report, yes?
Yeah. And you can see it's created a formula here and it's put the parameters up here. And so I can change it. Let's change that to be period 10 and the report's refreshed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an inquiry report in its own right.
Yes,
of course, you could create this report yourself, but you have the option to do that. All right, so I'm just going to delete that now.
Yeah, this is very convenient, actually.
So what I'd like to do now is explain about the other type of query. So we did table, and the next one is value. So here's a value formula here. To create a value formula, we click on the value icon, and you'll get the query builder. And you can see this one's already created, and you can see the business unit is here, the period is here, and you've got the accounts in W10, which is over here. And the important thing is, see this mode here, it's aggregation mode. So we're only bringing back a single value. So in this case here, we've got a base amount, and you can see on the right-hand side, it says sum. This is revenue. We had to reverse sign the amount. So if I have a look at the options here, we're doing a sum, and we're reverse signing it. If we go down to the non-revenue section, like telecommunications, and we have a look at this one is not reverse signed. Okay, so that's why Donald had like 2. He had current actual revenue, and then he had current actual expenses. So these are all your expenses, and these are your revenue. So he had 2 queries.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense? The only reason he did that is so that he could reverse sign this one. So this query has reverse sign, this one doesn't.
Yeah.
That makes sense? This one's called current budget revenue. So why did he create another one? So if we have a look at this, everything's exactly the same, reverse sign. The only thing different is that the ledger is
Ledger B.
Ledger B, yes.
Now, when I did training in London, the guys quickly picked up that why couldn't we just put like in a hidden row A like this and B
as a parameter and B,
yes,
Hidden parameter, yes.
And then we could have had one query which was called actual revenue, current revenue, and then we'd refer to the ledger, and then we would need less queries. Yep. So that could have been done. I'll come back to that in a moment, but I'd like to explain about, so if I highlight this formula, so notice that he's put the account on the side. So for product sales, it's account 11,000. For sales services, it's 12. So if I double click on this, yes, product sales. So for this account though, he's actually got 2. What he did there was he did this. So he selected 2 accounts. So that means that it's account 13,000 and 15,000. But what you could also do is type it in. So we could say, for example, ... is 13,000 to 15,000. And then you could then say comma 16,000.
Yeah.
So now it's a range and single accounts. We could also do it like this. So we go and like that.
This is Control and Shift, right?
That's just Control key. All right. So if I select this for 12, 13, 14, 15, and then go OK, you can see that it's just done the individual items, 12, 13, 14. But if we wanted to do a range like 12 to 15, if I go,
we use that sign.
I could select it like this, and then I'd say use code ranges. So now we'll go 12 to 15 and then the extra one.
Yeah.
So it'll just be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So if there's a new account in there, it'll be picked up. So there's lots of flexibility with multiple selects. So if I was to come into a formula like this, and here's my accounts, so I could also do it in here as well. It doesn't have to be in Excel. I could just do it like this. Okay, and it says in.
Okay.
So it's got to be in one of these in the list. But of course, you could do this format as well, but this works as well. So it says in this. You could also say not in, it's not in list. So now it's everything but what's in that list. So there's a lot of flexibility about these filters. So what I'd like to do now is just show you what happens when you change your mind about criteria. So for example, here we've got the A and the B ledger, and I want to make that a parameter. So I want to change the number of parameters that go into this report. So if I was to add a filter like this, for example, description, and I was to go OK, because the cell references don't change, all these queries now get the new filter, no problem. So I could say, you know, account type equals profit and loss or something like that. There's no problem there. I don't have to copy the formula down. Does that make sense? But if I do something like this and I say, look, the ledger is here, now the formula has a new parameter. So if I have a look at it now, so there's the formula and it's got a new parameter, but down here, none of these have got the new parameter.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so they're broken. See how it's broken? So in this case, because I've added a new parameter, I do have to copy this down.
Recopy, yeah.
Yeah, like this. And now it's okay. So now they've all got the ledger reference. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
What I'd like to show you now is what happens when you have errors. So for example, these queries here reference the account, and the account is mandatory. So, either you have to have the word keyword or, but it can't be blank, right? So if I make this blank, an error will occur. So I'll just make that blank. You see how we get this look up here? This is telling you when you have bad filters in your report. So it says, oh, look, the account's mandatory. You can't have it blank. It's telling you where it is. And I can double click on that and it'll take me to the cell. So it's taking me to there. I'll just double click on the next one and the next one. All right, so it's just giving me an idea. So maybe you've got account type and you put X for the account type, right? So I can then come back in here and fix it up. So I'll just say, look, it's all accounts, for example, and now it's fine. So that's what that window there is doing. It's just telling you if you've got report errors. So if I want to have a lot of report errors, for example, I could type in a wrong business unit. And so now I'm getting lots of invalid business unit errors coming up.
Wow.
So I've got an invalid business unit here. If I try and edit this report, you can see it's picked up that the business unit's wrong. So maybe you did the report and now you put it on the client site and they have different business units. So it says, okay, invalid business unit. And then it says, do you want to fix it up? So you can say, yes, that should have been PK2. And then you can fix it up. So the business unit is pretty important. So that if you don't get that right, everything below it starts to fail. I'll do a report from scratch to show you empty values. Okay, so here we go. What I'm going to do is have a business unit here and accounts. No, I'll have the product codes going down here, and then maybe I'll have the periods going across like that. Products and then periods. So here's my products. I'm just going to copy this because it's easier to copy this. So I'm going to copy that list of codes. And I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to say that it's product code. Then I'll take the business unit. Just put that up there. I'm going to put the periods going across. Yeah. Now, I could use formulas to do periods as well. So usually I do like a your start period here, and then you can do Excel formulas to make all these periods relative to whatever you enter over on the side here. But I'm just going to hard code them now. So insert it. So I'll put the description for the product there later. All right, so we've got our periods. So what we want now is the balance for that product and that for that period for this business unit. To do that, I'll click on value. So it says aggregation. That's good. Our business unit is here. Our table will be ledger. Ledger A is fine. The period will be here. So it's G7. The account, we don't need that, but we want the product code. That's one of the analysis codes. So we select that, and that's, in this case, H01 for the first row. And that's about it. So I'll just get the, now if I can't find a field, what I can do is click on the find, and then I can type like amount, and then it'll do a search.
Ah, okay, nice.
So if I did, for example, account type, yep, or I could have just did type. So general type, account type. So base. All right, so there's the base amount. So that's, I think, okay. Press okay, and now give the query name. So this will be product amount. So that's the amount. And I'll check the formula. So there's the references. Everything looks good. So what I'll do now is copy it across, and I'll copy it down.
Okay.
And then I could do like a total column here, of course, and that's just using Excel formulas in the normal fashion. The next thing we want to do is get the product description. So if I click on this and I change the product, I want to get that, whatever the description is for that product.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we've just typed these in. So if we have a valid product code, we should be able to get the description here. So to get the description, remember that value brings back a single value. So by default, it brings back numbers. So all these are values, but we can change the value formula to bring back a single description. So I'm going to choose value again. And this time, instead of saying aggregation, I'm going to change it to reference. So I'm saying it's reference, and just as we did before, the business unit. And now I could say, go to the ledger and get this, but that would be very expensive. Why would you go to all through the transactions just to get the analysis dimension description? So let's have a look at, is it the analysis codes? So, yep, so I think this is analysis dimension 11, and I'll just output the name and analysis code. So I'll make that. So if I've got this right, I should see, so yeah, H01. So I've got the analysis dimension number right. So that's dimension 11. So that's 11.
That's the correct dimension.
Yep. If I preview this, yes, I've got it all right. Now, so the tricky part was just knowing what dimension number it was in Sun. I could make that dimension number, like use it to find, put 11 up here, for example.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to leave it like this. Product.
Oh, the format value.
Text, yeah. Should be generalizing.
Yes. So
maybe general.
I was just waiting for you guys to pick it up. So you see how, because it was made text, it just put the formula as a text. So if I put that back to general, there we go. So I just reset the formatting.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah. So Excel was just treating this as text. It's almost like you did this. You know how you can do that? It's almost like that. So
there's an apostrophe, yeah?
Yeah. So I think it was set as text. So all of these didn't work because it took the format from here, text. All right, so I've set it back to general, and they're recalculating and getting the right description. If I was to change this to H01, then you can see that now these two rows are the same. Change that to H02. And now I get the right description. And of course, then I do the formatting and things like that. So we can just say something like that. And we have our report. All right, so what I'd like to describe now is how to do delayed formulas. So every time we come up here and we change the formulas, it went and recalculated everything. So if we looked at this first example, we have the business unit and we have a period. So if I want to change the business unit and the period, every time I touch it, so if I go FS1, it's got the data. Then I change the period, it refreshed the data again. So imagine that this was a very big report. So every time you touch one of the filters, the report will be refreshed because Sharperlight uses AutoCalc. It means Excel says the formula has a parameter that changed, and Excel will try and refresh that formula every time the parameter changes. If this takes 30 seconds to refresh, and we go, or maybe it takes 2 minutes to refresh because it's really big, what we want to do is be able to change all the filters and then click on a refresh button. When we look at the formulas, that's MD table, what we want to do is delay the formula until we press a button or we press one of these refresh buttons. So to delay the formula, we can just type in here DL for delay. That's one way we can do it. So we just type it in there. Or the other way we could do it is we could use the menu over here, and it says convert to delayed formula. So if I selected something like this, whole lots of formulas, maybe there's a profit and loss, 10, 15, 20, 100 formulas, we can say, look, just convert them all to delay. All right, so if I look at it now, it's got the DL. And if I change the business unit to fly, this didn't change. So there's no change until I click on
Calculate worksheet.
Yeah, so now it changed. Coming up here and clicking is inconvenient. What we want to do is put a button here so they change these and then they click the refresh button. To do that, we'll come to buttons, recalc, and then active worksheet. Right, so it's put a button there. So what I can do now is I can change the business unit, and then I'll click on the buttons, and now it's changed. Yeah. So this is just a picture, and it's got a Sharperlight macro assigned to it, and there's lots of macros in Sharperlight, like refresh the workbook, refresh the sheet, do a write back, and but the interesting thing is that when we save this workbook, it's an XLSX, it's not an XLSM, because even though we've got macros, we're a special type of add-in. So if you use Sharperlight macros, you don't have to save the workbook as macro enabled, which is a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Right. The only time you need to save it as a macro enabled workbook is if you type VBA code in and you write your own VBA code. If you use all the buttons in here, like write back and validation, and none of these require the workbook to be saved as XLSM. So if I want to put that back, I could delete the DL, and it'll be back to normal. So in this case here, with this workbook here, if I want to make all these delayed, I would select this area here and delay the formulas. Okay, so they're all got DL now. And then I would add the button worksheet.
Calculate active worksheet.
And then I'll
press that one, and it is recalculated.
So now I can change this here, and nothing changes until I click.
Yeah. Until we press the button.
What I'd like to do now is go on to some more advanced examples. I'll come back to sheet later. I'd just like to show you what the splitter does. I'll give you some scenarios. Let's take a profit and loss. So very often what we see with clients is they'll have a profit and loss or a trial balance. And for each period, they'll make a copy of that sheet. So they'll say, this is the profit and loss for period 1, and then they'll do another sheet, period 2, period 3, period 4, things like that. Or they might do this for each business unit. So there's a trial balance for PK2 and then PK1, and they'll make lots and lots of copies of the sheets. If they need to make a change, that each one of them will have different parameters, and they'll get lots and lots of sheets. So that's unnecessary if you use Sharperlight. So you can ask Sharperlight to say, take this sheet, this report here, use it as a template, and let's take the period, for example, and let's do this report for each period. Or for each business unit. So this report has two parameters. We can only split on what it has parameterized. So it's only got a business unit and period. So what I'll do is I'll come over to here, select splitter. So we're in splitter mode now. What would we like to create sheets for? So we'd like to create them one for every period. So what I'll do is I'll just click on the find, and it'll find good candidates for doing splits on. So it's basically looking for things that are parameterized. So we've only parameterized the business unit and the period. And so we can say, well, let's do a split on the periods. So we've got 2005. So we'll just do all these periods here. So we'll do the whole year. And then we come across to here and we can create a button. So there's our button. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to run through all these values and create a sheet and change out the period. Now this report here, think of it as a template now. So okay, so we've created our split. I'm just going to close that window now. And I'll edit this text here and say split by period, because that's what it does. Just make it a little bit bigger. All right, so when I click this, it's going to create a sheet and then change the period, and it'll be from period 1 to 12. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see the periods down the bottom there. So this is period 1. This is period 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is why next to the splitter there's a tree. And if I select the tree, we can actually see all the sheets that were created.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah.
Right. So what I can do is come over to here and I can say, well, let's delete all those. So now they're all gone, and we'll run it again. So I'm just running it again. So just imagine that we did the split on a cost center or analysis code or a business unit. So instead of doing all these sheets, you can ask Sharperlight to generate them for you automatically. All right, so one of the questions that come up with this is, do I have to have a fixed list? So I selected some periods, and what if it's to the next year? So when you do a split, if you look at the training guide, you can make the split based on a list. So I can have another sheet over here, and then I can have a table, and maybe that's got the business units or the analysis codes that you want to split on. And you can say that's the list, and that list can be driven by Sharperlight. So maybe Sharperlight makes that list, and then the split is based on that list in another worksheet. What I'll do now is I'll just delete these. So what I'll do now is I'll do another split, and this one will be on business unit. So let's do it again. So there's our business units. So I've got FS1. This one has nothing for that period, but Fly does. So I'm just doing 3 business units, and I'll put a button on here, and I'll close this. If I don't close this window, I won't be able to edit things properly. Just be mindful that when you're doing splits and you've finished, close this window. All right, so now we can edit this as a video.
Split by business unit.
Yep. So let's have a look at that. So now you can see that's Fly. Go to the next one, that's FS1.
FS1.
FS4.
And FS4.
These reports that it generates, if you want to keep them, notice that every time it runs, it deletes them. So if I run that again, it deletes the business units and it does them again. So if you want to keep them, what you can do is let's run the report. So there they are there. And if I wanted to keep this report here and not have it deleted, I could come to it, and then up here there's an elevate sheet to root level. If I did that, it would keep it as a normal report. The next thing I'd like to do is just talk about distribution. If you save this workbook and you give it to someone, so I'm just going to close this workbook and open it again. If I give you this workbook, you'll get hash value appearing where all the Sharperlight formulas are. So all of these will be hash value because you don't have Sharperlight. So if someone wants to give this workbook to someone and just leave the values, in the ribbon up the top here, we have some functions and we can say convert to delayed formulas, and there's something called detach formulas. So if I run this, all the Sharperlight formulas will be removed and just the values are left. So if you save that workbook and give it to someone, they can see the value.
So this is like copy and paste as value for everything inside the file, right?
Yes. So see the formula there?
Very nice.
If I say detach formulas, it says be careful.
Yeah.
You don't want to save the workbook and lose all your formulas, but you save. So I've said yes, and now the formulas are gone, and it's just the values.
Yeah. If we send to anyone else who doesn't has Sharperlight installed on you and on their local machine, right? So the value is not like error value.
Yes.
It giving the value, the number. It's like copy paste. Yeah.
So what's left? Only the Excel formula, right?
It only removes Sharperlight formulas. So this workbook, you can distribute it without issues. All right. The other options here are like use cache. So if you're running Excel over the internet, for example, hosting in the cloud. So you've got clients in their office, but their system is hosted in the cloud. So that the clients can still use Sharperlight to remote connect to the instance in the cloud. And the only issue there is that when you ask for a refresh, for example, this table here, that's one query. So it goes to the cloud and it comes back with the results. And and this is one query, and this is one query. So if they have slow internet and their latency is high, it can be, so Sharperlight's very quick, but if their internet's slow, maybe we can only get 10 queries per second because that's what their internet allows. So in that scenario there, you can turn on use cache, right? And that just makes it faster. Or
what does it do actually?
It will do analysis of the workbook. And so instead of doing 10 queries for these 10 cells, it'll try and do one with 10 queries inside it, one call. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Right.
So
on the internet, each one of these makes a call. So it goes get the results, and then it goes to the web, and it comes back. It says get the result, goes to the web, and comes back. And the back and forth is slow. So Sharperlight will say, well, let's do all of these in one call.
Okay. It decreased the time needed for the back and forth requests, right?
Yes. It's like getting, just imagine if people ask you to buy them lunch and you bought someone lunch and then the next person said, buy me lunch. The next person, buy me.
Right.
It's better to talk to everyone and go once to buy everyone lunch.
Exactly. Okay, got it.
So here's some examples of publisher. So we use Sharperlight to also publish some reports about what's inside Sharperlight. So this is the main index page. And as some examples of published reports, here's one here. Just a very simple example where we've got some menus, their published reports, some sort of slicer here, bit of a dashboard, just showing some of the different techniques. So here's one where we've got a chart and we click on that and refresh an area. There's also the ability to do write-backs. Here we've got some KPIs. We select a KPI, and then we've got some averages. For example, you could enter some values. So we enter a value for that particular month, and then we go to the next one and enter a value, the actuals for that KPI for each month. So this is an example of a simple write-back. And another example would be coming in here and say approving those budgets or actuals. So just clicking on these things like this. Another example of write back in the web would be this case here. We have a tree and you can come down to a particular cost center and come into that cost center and then start entering in values. So in this case here, it's actually budget values. So we can start entering in what the budgets will be. In this particular dashboard, it's recording the budget values outside of Sun. And because you have actuals in Sun systems, if we go to a different report, you can see where you'll have budgets and then you'll have actuals appearing. So using Scheduler, you can actually write back the budgets into Sun, and you can also read the actuals out of Sun. So that's Publisher, but before we go on to Publisher, I'd like to close off the explanations about Excel and show you doing a write back in Excel. So what I'll do is I'll go to a new sheet and we'll have a look at the write back option. So at the moment, I don't have anything in the sheet at all, but I'll produce an example to show you after I've explained what the write back mapping does. So to start off a write back from Excel, what you would do is you come to the write back icon and then select the product. So in this case, we're targeting Sun. And as you've seen previously, maybe you have a business unit somewhere like that, and you can parameterize the business unit. Then you would come to the table. And at the moment for Sun systems, there's the ledger import, but I believe the reference tables are currently being worked on. So at some later date, you'll see more tables there for write back, maybe for creating chart of accounts and analysis codes. But at this stage, there's the ledger. When you select a table, you get a list of fields. Now, in the case of ledger import, there is some settings in Site Setup where you can choose the level of detail for your ledger import. You can, in this case here, I've got the least amount of detail, so it's really cut down. There's only about 6 or 7 fields here. But if I change the detail, you can do the analysis codes, and if you change the detail to the highest level, you can go down to the extended descriptions. So to keep it simple, we've just got this cut down version. So in here, we've got the fields, and what usually happens is you'll have your accounts like this, and you would have maybe the period. So I'll just put the period up here, 2014. 005, so I've got some accounts, then of course some dates. So what would happen here is you would say, for example, my accounts are in this column here. And of course we could have labels up the top here, like this. And we want to exclude that. So we could say, for example, the accounts are from a D4 down to D1000. Now notice that there's a star here on the field. That's just designating that this field is mandatory. If it's left blank, it's optional. Right. So if in Excel workbooks, you can have quite a complex layout. So you can have, for example, an account like this, and then you may have like a total in here for all the accounts. So sometimes you want to exclude certain rows, and for this reason, there's a concept of a driver. If I look at this and right-click on it, we can make the account code the driver field. And when we do that, the star goes black. And what that basically says is that if you don't find an account code, then ignore the whole row. I did 1000 like that, and then I did 13 here. This row here would be ignored because there's no account code. So that driver concept is core. And then we say, oh, where's the period? Well, I could double click on that again, and I can say, look, everything's the same period. So now that's a cell reference there. The base amount, well, let's put some amount in here. 102, 103, 104. And so I'll just say it's this column. Now there's some smarts in the ledger import in that if they're negative signed, well then it knows if it's a debit or credit, or you could have a separate column for the debit credit, but we'd have to open up the number of fields in the detail layer, transaction date, etc. All right, so that's basically you go through and do all the mapping. And what I'll do is just preview that, and we get a bit of a heads up of what it's looking like. So you can see we've got an extra row in there for the account, so that's not quite right. So we want to exclude that. And you can see that because I said D4, we picked up this account. So really we wanted to start from D5 onwards. Preview that again, and that's looking much better. So we're getting a bit of an idea of what we're going to write back. And over on this side here, we've got an error just saying, look, transaction date, at the moment it's left blank, and so that's not valid. So I've got a choice here of either I could put the transaction date in all these columns here, or I could actually put the keyword date in there. So Sharperlight has a concept of relative date calculations and period calculations, where if you put in the word date in uppercase or period, it'll be whatever the current period is or whatever today's date is. So if I preview that again now, I know it says date there now, but that's picking up today's date, and you can see there's no errors occurring there. That's the basics of a write back. Obviously you don't bring this window up here. What you do is put some buttons on the screen on the workbook, and usually there's two buttons, or one's a validate button and one's a execute button. And you would also give this write back a name, for example, ledger import trans, for example, and that will save that as a name that you can bring up again. All right, so instead of me putting in all these values correctly, I will now generate some samples based on other systems just to give an idea of what write back looks like. But before I do that, some of the questions about ledger import is what sort of validation does it do? So as you saw, it does some basic validation, like is a date a date, is a number a number. It also makes sure that everything balances. If I have an invalid count code, it should pick that up as well. So I'll just type in, put an X in here and see what happens. So I'll put X there, I'll just validate that. And you can see that it's picked up that that's an invalid account code. Normally when you press a button that you really don't want that window to come up like this. Instead of having that window come up like this, and you can double click on it and find out what the error is. You can see that. So I've clicked on that and it's showing me the error. Instead of doing that, what you can do is put the errors back into the workbook. So what I'm going to do is actually merge these cells, merge them. So format cells, just wait for Excel to catch up. So I'll merge those and I'll just make them a different color, nice and bright. And if I come to the write back options, what I can do then, sorry, not options, processing options. There's lots of options in here, like save the write back to a CSV file, but there's one here called logging cell. So I can say, look, if there's any issues like validation errors, let's put them in cell N2. So if I now do a validate, instead of getting the pop-up window, I can see what's going on over here. So if I save that and then create a button, so buttons, write back. So there should be one here called validate. So that's the template I want to use. So there's my validation button. So just move, usually that's above the area that you want to write back. And then maybe you create another button to after doing the validation to actually do the write back. So there we go. And we'll put that up there. If I click validate now, still an error, fix that error up, and then validate again. So as far as the pre-validation is concerned, it's looking good. And then we execute, and then we get more detailed errors. All right, so what I'll do now is create some templates, and we'll do some real write backs. Now, when I do the write backs, it's writing data back into the underlying database. Now we're back to the write backs again. And in this particular system, we've got employee categories. So a very simple table. We've made the code, the driver, and we have some values here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update some of these. So I'll just put a few characters in there, and what I'm going to do is write that back, and you can see there's our status. And then I'm going to come over to here and refresh that table. So now I'm getting the data out of the system again, and the X's are still there. Of course, I could go to a web page as well and see the same data there. So what I'll do now is to show you that same example in the web. So this is the main index page for the web channel, and you can see that you can see all your published reports here, and you've also got a list of the write back enabled tables. So I'm just going to use that list there. There's quite a few, and I think it's the project tracker that we were just looking at. So these are the tables that are write back enabled for project tracker. And what Sharperlight does is it generates a data entry form and a grid for each one of these tables. And have a look at that. So there's the grid, there's the XXX. So what I'll do is just change that to AAA, enter that. We'll come back over here and refresh. And you can see that that's been updated on both sides.
So it's automatically update the table.
Yes.
Right.
What I've just shown you there is that if a table is write back enabled in the data model, you can write to it through Excel, you can write to it from the web, and you can also update and write data from Scheduler as well, which we'll come to later on in this session. But the important points I want to get across is that you do the mapping in Excel, you set your driver, and then you say where in your worksheet you have the values, and sometimes they're a cell reference like a shared value like the business unit or a period, for example, and you can hard code them and say, look, all the active ones are yes. So, and then on process options, you've got this logging cell and other cells as well, but usually that's enough to get a basic write back working. Now, I have worked on some sample workbooks. For example, while you're typing in values for write back in Excel, to have validation occur while you're entering the values. So on the Sharperlight Resources website, you can find that example, but I'll just bring it up now. So this is an example of a validation that you can do for write backs. Here, pretend that we're entering a journal, so we're entering in accounts and other details. So as we're entering them in, maybe we want to validate the analysis codes. So what you can do is while you're entering them in here, you can use Sharperlight formulas to actually do validation. So here we're checking if the account actually exists, and we return 0, 1. And we're checking if the analysis code is valid. So if I type in an invalid analysis code, so that product doesn't exist, you can see that the icon turned red. And if I put it back to a valid one, so that's a sort of a validation you can use with
okay.
Just remember we did a formula to look up the product description. So these ones here are just looking to say, does that code really exist in products? And so if it doesn't, it makes an error. And then this one says, well, if everything's okay, everything should add up to 2. And if it doesn't add up to 2, then one of these codes are wrong. And so that can happen before you even do the posting or pre-posting validation. These templates that I've just shown you at the moment, they're all on the website, sharperlight.com, and I'll just explain a little bit about this website. What you'll be interested in is the resources menu, and here we have data models. If you want to get the latest data model, this is where you would go. There's the dynamics section, you've got HR systems, SAP Business One, etc. Installing Sharperlight, there's 2 places you need to look. One is release builds. So in here, you'll find things like install guide, statement of release, and there's the installer. I recommend that you never use the 32-bit, always use the 64-bit. The 32-bit is only for special cases. It's quite rare to have someone on 32-bit Windows, so most people have 64-bit Windows. And then the next question is, well, if I have 32-bit Excel, do I have to install the 32-bit version? So no. The 64-bit has add-in for 32-bit Excel and 64. So if you get this version here, you'll be fine.
So it will depend on the Excel version, right?
No, always get the 64 because it supports both 32 and 64-bit Excel.
Oh, all right.
The only time you use this is if they've got 32-bit Windows, which is very rare.
Oh, okay. Mostly 64 by now.
Yes. So if you do this install, it will automatically detect what version of Excel you have and put the right add-in in for you. The add-in's not there for whatever reason. You've also got this button here to put the add-in into Excel. So that will also put it in. It just works out what add-in you need. At 32 or 64, it does it for you. So I'm just explaining a little bit about the website now. So I'll continue down that line of thought. So we've looked at there's where you get your data models. That's where you get your release information. So there's some documents there. If I come to current builds, this is the latest builds that we have. So sometimes we do a release and then 6 months later we do another release. If there's new functionality that you would like, the latest, maybe there's a fix that you want, you can get that in current builds. So here you can see the versions. The latest build is this one here. The other things of interest in here is manuals and guides. So you can download some training guides. So there's a training guide for Dynamics, Business One, and Sun System 6. So probably you'd want to get one of those guides and then maybe download some of these how-to guides, FAQs, etc. The other resource that you may be interested in is the articles. So as you get familiar with the product, you'll have questions, and so there are various posts and you can search them. But generally what I do is I do a Google search. So something like Sharperlight, for example, right back. So let's see what happens if we do that. So there we get all these hits, and there will also be a mixture of videos as well. Or let's do Sharperlight Scheduler, and then so there's some videos on that topic and also the articles. There's also in this menu YouTube. So go to the YouTube link. This is just a page wrapping up the YouTube channel, but you can also go to the YouTube channel direct. So this is just Sharperlight wrapping up the videos from YouTube, because Sharperlight can read cloud services like YouTube and do a report on it. So this is Sharperlight using YouTube as a data source. So if I was interested in Publisher, I could click on that, and we've got all the videos there. Or we could just go to YouTube Direct, and I'll search on Sharperlight. So there's our channel, Firelight, and if we look at the playlists, you'll see that it's broken up into various topics.
Yeah.
Probably the first videos that you might want to look at is install. Okay, how to install and set up an application server. So that's probably a good place to start, and it'll show you how to do the install, next, and some of the basics. Or you could read the installation guide. Still a little bit more I'd like to cover before we go to Publisher, and that is setting up of accounts. So this is the main menu for Sharperlight, and it's broken up into the basic categories. So over on the right-hand side, we've got setup related items, and then we've got reporting, and then we've got more developer material, and then we've got just some miscellaneous items like backup. Beginning of the training, I showed you client setup. That's where you do your connections to your databases. But once you've got Sharperlight set up, you move on to site setup. And this is where you set up your accounts. So this is the logon screen. And we come in. At the top here, we have licenses. And the way licenses work is that if you import a license file, so let's say I've got a license file like this. If you just double click on that, Sharperlight will load the license file for you, and it'll bring it into the screen here. Or you could browse it for it like that. Now, with licenses, if you haven't applied a license, Sharperlight goes into demo mode. And what that means is that if you do like a list, you get the first 99 rows, and it just limits your experience. If you do something like a profit and loss, those balances will be correct. It's just lists like this will be limited to the first 99 rows. Okay, so the way it works is that if there's a client and they require something other than the demo mode, we issue a license for a month, for example, so that you can try it out with the client. When it comes to expire, a few days before it expires, about 13 days out, you'll get a red message appear on screen saying your account down. So that's licensing. It's broken into two types of users. These are for users, so they can use Excel and Publisher, and then the web users are cheaper, and the idea there is that they just read reports that have been published in the web, and they don't author things. Usually most sites will have a few power users or full users and a lot more web users. Moving down, so down here we've got users, and the important part I'd like to convey to you here is that Sharperlight supports a number of different authentication models. One of them is Active Directory. So this is my account here. So if I enable that, I don't have to sign into Sharperlight. It will use my Active Directory account to single sign on. But you could also make named users, like for example, admin and guest. They're not an Active Directory account. So I have to enter a password, and that's maintained by Sharperlight. Whereas this is maintained by Windows, right? Right. So if I come in here and I sign out and I sign in, notice I don't have to enter my username and password. And, and if I come in here, I can see what account I sign in as. All right, so I'm Ivan Robson. Okay. Now, if I was to disable that account, so I disable that. Yep. So that's no longer working. But I have these window domains groups here. So I'm a member of this group. So what I recommend you do is you use Windows domain groups, and you create like a finance group, and the IT department adds people in here to that group, and then in Sharperlight you just add that one group. Okay. So if I sign in again, so I'm signing in again. Now I'm going to come in under that Windows domain group. So I didn't sign in. And if I look here, it still says Ivan Robson, but if I just go to more detailed information, you can see that, yes, I'm Ivan Robson, but Actually, I used test G and test G3. I was a member of both those groups. So that's how I got in. If I disable these two groups, so then I have to sign in as admin or guest or something like that.
So let's say you are registered as yourself and as a member of a group. Which one will be the priority?
If I register as myself, then this takes priority over the groups. So I can come in here and change the permissions and say, look, no Sun Systems. See, I've grayed that out. So that means I won't be able to access Sun Systems. So I'll just save that, and I'll come back in here and I'll sign out, sign back in. Now I've denied myself access to Sun Systems now, but I see access denied.
Oh, okay, right.
The recommendation is you use Windows domain groups, and that way they can add people to that group outside of site setup, outside of Sharperlight, and they can, add and change things without ever coming into here. So each one of these, you can also have, even though it's a Windows domain group, it then belongs to a group. And so down here, you've got user groups. So each one of these users, you assign them to a group. And so if anyone's in G002, you can say, look, by default, they don't have access to this, for example. Right, so we come back up to the users. So which one do I belong to? I belong to the default group, but I can put myself in the admin group like that. What I recommend you do when you install Sharperlight is you always trust your admin accounts, and Site Setup will ask you to trust whatever the first account is that ran it. By default, when you first set it up, admin and guest have no password, but you can either disable these accounts like this, or you can put password lock them down. But I recommend you enter a domain account like someone who's got admin permissions, so the next person who signs in doesn't have to worry about passwords. So there's a lookup button here, so you can discover domains. It's just a bit slow in discovering them. There's the users. This is locally on my PC, or you could just type in the domain name there and start browsing them. So if I trusted the administrator groups, that would be an easy way of just covering anyone who signs in. If you trust a particular person, well, the next person maintaining that site might use a different account and there'll be problems. So doing a group is a good way of solving it. So now I'm going to talk about setting up Sun. So under here, there's product settings, and here we have Sun systems. So each system can have different setup, and this is like your global settings. So up here, we can say what is your default business unit. So every time you start a new query, what business unit do you want to start with? So I've said, let's start with DEM. And then we've got the ledger import level. So we've got low, medium, high. So that determines how many fields you see. And then we have show additional fields. I think they're like extended, yes, the extended descriptions 1 to 25. And then we've got, when we do write back, the default Sun Systems user. So if we don't say anything at the user level, this is what it'll put on the ledger import. It'll be this user account. So that's your top level. And then when you come down to the users, let's have a look here. We've got additional settings. So for example, we can restrict the business units.
Restrict, yeah.
So if it's my account, I can say that, and I belong to a group like administrator group, but if I changed it to G002, anyone in this group, they can only see, for example, PK2 and Fly, for example. Anyone in that group, they're the only two business units they can see. The other one is if we do write backs, what Sun Systems account do we want to map the write back to? And that's about the only settings you need to be concerned about, is just restricting the business units and maybe what write-back account to set it to. The other thing of interest in here is you can turn on auditing for write-backs. So if you want to know who's doing write-backs, you can come here into write-back and then restrict write-back to particular tables and also keep an audit of the history. And then you say, well, if you're keeping an audit of write-backs, how do you know what went on? So if we look at the system data model, I select the table here and I go to system. This is all the stuff related to Sharperlight. So here we can see what users there are, what the company details are, licensing, and we've got a table here called write-back history. So if we query that, so if I come into here and do a relative, so let's see all the write-back history going back 1 year. So this is the example of relative date calculations. So without me typing in dates, every time I run this, it's going to do from the last year up to today. And if I output that and preview it, there's our write-back history. I explained earlier that when you install Sharperlight, there's an application server and then you've got clients. And the clients remote connect to the application server. So the application server is where you have your connections to Sun and you have your data models and everything. And what's important is that on the application server, there's a Sharperlight service called Sharperlight Server, right? And normally that's set to automatic. If you use Windows authentication for connecting to your databases, the other thing you'll need to set is the account. So here I've got an account there. So that's best practice, that you always run it as a service account here, the one that has permissions to connect to your database. So that's when that service runs, people can remote connect to it. So just one box in the office or in the cloud, and people remote connect to it. And this does Excel and Publisher, and it also does the web content. So because that service is running, I can see this content here. There's the address for the service. So let's start with writing some reports in Publisher. So I'll go to the main menu. So here we have Publisher. So it's single signed in for me. So I've got over 2,000 reports on here, but what I'll do is I'll just click New, and I'll call this Train FS. This is the code for my report. So that code, see the code up the top here? That's what appears in the link. So that's your code there for your report. So I'll call this report T1, basic accounts inquiry. And then down here, we've got the edit query. And now it's exactly the same as what we have in Excel. So here I'm going to leave it as summary report, come into the products and select Sun Systems. I'll leave the business unit as DEM, and let's do ledger. Let's do that product example that we saw earlier. So we've got our product code and we've got our name. We'll keep this report very simple, and I'll look for the amount. There's the base amount. I'll rename those columns. I'll call this product code, product name, and amount. Okay, so nothing there. Oh, I restricted my account to just two business units. That's why I
the restriction.
Yes, I've left it on there. So it kicked in. So I'm just going to make sure that I only get products that are greater than or equal to A. That's another way of getting rid of those blanks and hashes. All right, so there's our report. What I'll do now is press OK, and I'll press apply. Normally I just click view and it comes up in the browser, but for some reason my browser is not showing the link at the moment. So I'll just come over to here and copy the link to the report. and I'll paste it in here. So there's that report. So there's the filters. They don't look very nice at the moment, but we'll clean that up. And there's the table. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just clean these filters up. So I don't want them to change the ledger, for example, or counts. I just want to basically let them choose the business unit and hide everything else.
Oh, okay.
If I come to options, I can say how many filters are on a row. So if I said there's one on a row, apply, and then refresh, now I get one on a row. Next, I come back into the query and I right click and I say hide. So hide, 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 and hide. So these are all now grayed out, and apply, and we refresh. And now we've only got one here, which is the select the business unit. So the next thing I'll do is I'll just change this here so that it's like a drop-down list. So what I'll do is come back into here and I'll select the business unit, go to options, and then I'll use this area here. So I'll just say, look, I'd like a multi-select so I could do 2 business units at the same time, and it's a drop-down list. So we go OK, apply, and now I could select 2 business units at the same time. So that's a consolidation of the 2. If I wanted to, I could just do 1. From here, of course, I can do a chart. So I've just, but those values are all negative. Nice. Yep. So
yes.
So maybe if I reverse sign those, it'll be more chart friendly. But over here on options, I can say by default, do I want to show the data as a chart, as a pivot table, as a PDF, or maybe the data is a menu, so I want to show it as a menu. So an example of that would be like this. So if you had a data set that said, like the main menu and then the sub menu and then the link, that would make, if you displayed it as a menu, it would appear like this. We'll talk about that later. But what I'll do is I'll just say, look, let's change it to a chart by default. And because most of the values are negative, I'll just reverse sign them. And let's refresh that report. So now we said we want to do a chart by default.
Ah,
yeah,
nice.
Right, and if you said, well, I don't want this sort of chart, I can come to the chart tab and then change it and say, look, I like a bar or a radial or waterfall, donuts. But the important thing is the data has to match that chart type. So if you want to do a Gantt chart, you just need to have, or a calendar or a tree map, you just need the data to match that. And you've also got styling in here as well. All right, so just while we're on styling, so I'm going to come back here and I'm going to change to table grid.
Table grid.
So it's still a table, but now what we can do is we can do grouping. So you can say, look, group on this item and put a subtotal there. So you can do, it's almost like a pivot table.
Oh.
Right. Next.
Interesting.
So just like in Excel, what we can do is also do splits. For example, if I wanted to do a split on the periods, so here's our period. Let's say so I'm just going to hard type this in for the moment. So we've got some periods in here. What I'd like to do is run this report so we have like a sheet for each period, similar to what we did in Excel. So if I come over to options, there's this option called split reports based on filter. So if I've got a filter, no matter what the filter is, I can do a split on that. So let's do a split on the account period. and also combined all periods. I go apply, and we have the split by period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Just like the Excel version, yes.
A lot of concepts I haven't had time to talk about, so I'd just like to race through them now, and maybe you can watch the recording later. I'm going to clone this report now. So I've made another copy of it. If you make a mistake, you can always come back in here and restore up to the last 9 changes. And of course, when you deploy, you can export all these reports to a file and then import them on the client side. In the case of Excel, all the reports are inside Excel, so you don't need that export import. So I've made a clone of it. So this is number 2. And what I'd like to do here is just do like a trial balance. I'm going to get rid of all of this. And what I'm going to do is just put in the account and the account description and the balance. So very simple report. What I want to do is I want the base amount to repeat one for each period. So it goes across like this, and I have all the columns going across. So I've got my periods up here. If I put the period in here, that's no good. They're going down. I want this amount to be for period 1, period 2, period 3. So that's no good. I will take that out. So I have the filter up here, period 1 to 12. What I can do is come to the options on base amount. So options. And if you look on the right-hand side here, I can bind a filter to this output. But if I bind the account period, it says just apply that filter just to this output. But if I go one more step, I can say, find all the combinations for that filter and make a column for every combination. So that's why it's turned blue there. I just clicked set dynamic output. All right, so let's have a look at it now. You see here is put at account per, which is the name of that. See that at account per, that's the description, and this is the name. So you can change the name like this. So we'll have a look at it now. So now we've got the amount for each period up to period 12. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll just add a total column. Because there's 12 base amounts, Sharperlight will just work it out and say, oh, that's a dynamic output. So it knows that it should total it up. So I'll just reference that and say total. And now we have the total on the end. So if I select all these rows, it'll match that value there. See how it's changing up the top here? All right, so let's just save that. Put that over here. So, okay, I still got that split on there, so I've got to take that off because I cloned the report. So I'll just take that off. Don't need that anymore. So now we've got our periods going across with a total. If we define a drill through, like we did in Excel, that would also appear on here. So we could see it on the right-click menu, and then we could drill through to the transactions. The next thing that we'd want to do is maybe do an opening balance. I'll just do a simple version. Sharperlight has the concept of subqueries. So what you can do is you can do a whole new query to get almost like the values in Excel. You can get the opening balance by running another query. So let's do that. So the opening balance will be everything before this period here. So account per, that's the name of the filter. So we'll say everything before that period, get the value. So here we've got description. So we just want it in here at the beginning. So I'm going to add the subquery here, and it's come up as aggregation. That's good. And this at business unit, that's referring to the business unit that's here. because that's the name of the filter, biz uni, and then we'll just put the ledger. So the ledger's I could make it the same as this one, but I'm not going to bother. The period, well, the period, it needs to be less than, so I'm just going to type in less than the period from. So here, see, we've got account per and account per to. That's the from, and that's the to. So we want to be less than the from value. And as for the accounts, well, we want it to be whatever the output account is. Yep, we don't want it to be all accounts. So that's where the percents come in. So percent account code. So there's the percent account code there. So we're making this filter the same as.
Oh, okay.
And then we get the base amount.
For the result.
All right, so now I've got it. We have a subquery. I'm going to change this to say opening balance, like that. Now this will make the report run slower because it has to run a query for every row. But let's.
Oh, quota limit has been exceeded.
Okay, so when I was in site setup, I played around with the security settings. So I just need to sign out and fix up my permissions. I think I put quotas on. So one of the site setup limitations you can put on is how many subqueries are you allowed to do. So I accidentally applied those. Okay, so now I don't have any of those quota limits. And there's my opening balance. And there's my by period. So again, I can go into the SQL and I can have a look at the SQL statement it generated. So there's all your periods, and then there's my subquery. So it's giving you the first one that says,
Just a month from the period. Oh,
yep.
Before the that one.
Yeah.
That one is the.
So
Okay.
we can actually see what it did under the hood, and oh yes, that's the first account, and it's getting less than that period, and I've still got security to restrict us to only certain business units. But the idea with Sharperlight is you don't write SQL statements. You get data from the service, so it's secure. They can't bypass the security. So that looks like a good report, and I can go OK and apply, and we'll refresh that now. And now we have another report with opening balance. So we have 2 reports so far. If you send clients the link to this report and this report, that's okay. But over time, you get 10, you get 15 reports. So it's best to wrap the reports up in a menu. So you only send them one link and the menu lets them navigate to all the different reports.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So similar to this example here, where we just send them this link and then they can get to all their reports from there. Okay, so what I'd like to do is create a menu now where we have this report, and maybe we have some others as well. And then we can see how we create menus to wrap this up. I'll just create a clone of this so we get one more. And I'll give this a better description. I'll call this trial balance. And I'll call this one trial balance 2, just so we have at least 3 reports. So I have these reports now. I would like to create a menu. So I'll right click, and under other, there's create menu. And just select the top item. It'll ask you what reports do you want to put in the menu. So I'd like that one, that one, that one, and maybe I'll just put that one in. Press OK. I'll publish reports. There's the title, and then this is the main menu title. So I'll just call this general, and that'll be in general as well. And this one will be, I'll just say accounts, and this will be trial balance, And this one will be in trial balance as well. That's my menu name.
Okay.
Press OK. You can give the report a code. So I'll just call this gets train FS and FS. In here, you can say, well, when you first go into the web page, what do you want to see? So let's just find a graphic that we. So when we first go into the web page, you can show a report or maybe a link to something that's online. So I'm just looking for some graphics. To see copy image address. So there's number 5. So that just to give you an example. So I'll just put that in there. And so here's the menu that it's generated. I could just go click and re-report. Oh, okay. So it was a big picture. So here's our menu.
Okay, there's the opening picture. Eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But normally what you do is you put a report in. So in these cases here, so the main landing page is a dashboard and you have a link to that.
Yeah, dashboard, yes.
Yep. Usually it's a high level one that just tells you what the current period is and what your balance is looking at, how many what your age debtors are, for example. So here's the menu. So if I choose that, that's one report, that's another. So they're now in here. And we can keep on adding to these menus. As to what the menu looks like, if I come back to that, there's an article on this. So that's using the system data model and a custom data set. So what you can do is you can create like a CSV file format and to make a little data set. So here we just have what's the order of the menu, what the menu bar is, what the submenu is, and what the link to the report is, so /report. So if I wanted to add another report in here, I could just copy that and say it's on the next position and that's number 2, and I'll just leave that link as it is. If I preview that, that's my new menu. And if I look at the options, see how it's been rendered as a menu, horizontal, and there's the default content there. And we then have a look and we've got an extra item in the menu. If I wanted to change the style and make it like a menu panel, I could do that. And now we've got a menu panel. Quite a lot you can do there. There's also layouts and other things which I haven't had time to explain. So there's our menu from before and our very large image. I'll just change the theme. So for a white theme with no borders, and with dark. So I'll just refresh that again.
Oh, okay, nice.
And then you can see that that's cascaded all the way down to all the sub-content.
Yes.
I just like the latest style for theming is to have no borders. So of course you could come in here and each individual report remove the borders and padding and things like that, but it's much better to go to your menu and set the theme there, and everything under the menu will get that theming. So I've just removed the borders because it looks a bit cleaner, and and flattened it. In here you've got things like custom CSS styling. You can do your own custom headers and footers. So that header up the top here with the logo, you can come into here. So this was generated by the create menu process. You can edit this and you could change the image here and put in the client's logo, for example. There are templates.
Okay.
So there's templates in here like custom report header and footer. So you would use that and then it would basically give you the same thing, but you could replace this logo here. And you can see that there are some variables. And for example, it's getting a variable for the report title. It's just doing a basic sign out. But if you did HTML, if you know HTML, you can do anything in here, including adding your own JavaScript to do additional work. There's also a concept of annotations. So I'll try and get time to race through it, but the idea is that you can come in here and start adding annotations to reports. If I wanted to add annotations to this trial balance, what I can do is come into the query. Down here we've got annotations, and what we can say is we'd like to keep notes against the business unit and the account. So any report that we have business unit and account, we want to share notes and annotations about it. I'm not restricting it to the scope of this report. I'll just call this BU and account, business unit and account. That's what these annotations are going to follow. I'd like to select what filters. So it'll be the business unit and the account. That's what the note is going to be tied to. So I go OK, OK, and apply. And then when I refresh this report, you see you've got annotations here. So I can start putting in some notes. Please check the balance. I go, and then someone else can reply to that. And it'll be just like on your mobile phone. You'll have a series of chat messages going back and forth.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
This is like the comment section. Yeah. Okay.
So someone can say, yes, I've seen it, or yes, I've executed the task. So there's some basics, so you can see who's seen your comment and things like that. So the next thing is you can put an icon in this report so that you can see if there's an annotation or not. What we'll do is we'll come back to the report and we'll add an icon. So I'll just put it after the description, and I'll add an expression. If I do find on annotation, so these annotations can work in Excel as well. And it says here, click to add annotations. So what's our code? It was BU account, I think it was. Might have been accounts. So that's HTML. I just checked that code, BU account. Good. I've just added an expression, and what that'll do is put an icon into the report, tell you if there's any annotations there or not. So I'll say this notes. So we'll apply that.
Oh.
So now we can come in here. I'll just add some more. So normally this is like a chat session between two people. So you can see there that there's it's gone green, so there is some notes there. And then you can click on that and recall those notes. And so another report, they can have an icon, and if you tie it to the same code for that business unit and that account, notes will always follow around. So people can then discuss, especially if they're doing things like budgeting, they can make notes. For example, age debtors, they may want to do some notes about following up the account. That was a quick run through of annotations. I'd like to now go on to the other thing that Publisher is good for, which is doing things like remittances and invoices, things like that. I'll get an example. Okay, so here's a published report, and there's a query in here, and it's just doing like top 10 customers. To do top 10, it's just using some more options, which I haven't had time to explain here, top 10. And then we're sorting by the amount. So the biggest amounts are at the top, right? So we have a query, and if we go to page, what we can do is actually design very similar to what you see in the Crystal reports. So we can come into here and we can start doing a design. So here I've got some tables and charts, and I've got another table there with top 10 vendors. You can do is do an invoice layout or a remittance layout with company logos, etc. So if I looked at this particular report, I'll just get the link for that. So this report, I'm saying the default layout is not a table, not a chart, but it's a PDF. So when we submit that, we get the PDF, and then that can be downloaded, printed, etc. So for example, we use Page Designer to issue invoices for licenses. So you can make a pixel perfect design there. Right, so there are videos on how to use Page Designer. So we won't cover that here.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I'd like to cover is how to do grouping. Let's go back to our other example that we had. So just to train FS, our trial balance would be a good one. So this trial balance, we have our accounts, and what I'd like to do is group this by account type and have subtotals come out for the account type. To do that, what I'll do is come into chart of accounts, select the account type, and I'll put that over here. And I'll just change that description to say account type. So at the moment, we've got balance sheet, we've got clients, creditors, etc. But we have no subtotal here at the moment. So I'd like to change that. So what I'll do is I'll come into options and come to sorting, and I'll sort by account type and then account code. And then on account type, you've got some options here, basic, expand, collapse. So if I did collapse, I'll get a expand and collapse. But if I just say basic, anything that looks like a sum or a number will now have a subtotal on it. So there it is there. So there's our subtotal.
Classify, yeah. Classified by account type.
Mm-hmm. Now, if I don't want this repeated down like this, I could just come back into here and say on the table options, suppress repeating values.
Suppress.
Okay. There's also suppress 0 rows. Occasionally you get data with no values, so that looks good. So then I will.
It looks better.
So where's that report? Trial balance. I think it was this one. Okay, so there's our total row, and because we did a grid, it's automatically put expand and collapse there for us, and we could start that in a collapse state. All right, so if we wanted to do that in Excel, you think, well, I'd have to do that report again, but it's not the case. So what I'll do is I'll bring up this report and I'll put it on the clipboard. So copy the clipboard, come over to Excel. The reverse is true as well. You can start in Excel, put it on the clipboard. And if I use table, remember I said that table can't support groupings and collapse and all those sorts of things. Tables just have a list and there's no subtotals. So in this case, what we want to use is sheet instead. So I'm going to select sheet. Okay, I just better sign out and sign back in because those permissions are still taking effect. I select sheet. What sheet does is it doesn't put the information into a table, it just puts them into the cells. It copies and pastes them into the cells. So I'm coming to import from clipboard. There's my clipboard. And and maybe I'll put the PK2 over here and make that a cell reference. There's my report. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if I use sheet, Sharperlight needs to do the formatting of the numbers. What I'll do is I'll come back and I'll edit that formula and I'll come to base amount and I'll come to formatting. And because the sheet one, I'm responsible for the formatting. So I'll just say, look, negative values in red and in brackets and how wide the column is, etc. And I'll go okay. And now Sharperlight's done the formatting and I've got these here. It's similar to a pivot table in a way, a little bit different in that if you did a pivot table, you'd do a extract of a table in Sharperlight and then bind the pivot table to it. But this way we can parameterize it and refreshed this. Right, so the next thing with this sort of layout is what people will do is do a collapse. So they start off with the balance at the high level. So I'll do that now. Come back in to the sort options and I'll say, look, let's collapse. And now everything's collapsed by default.
Oh,
right?
okay.
There's
This
a complication with this.
Mm-hmm.
If we open up this button here, Excel will think that the sheet needs to be recalculated. So if we try and click on that, it will open it up and then it will click off recalc and then it'll refresh the workbook. So what we need to do is make this a delayed formula. So I'm just going to say delay.
The
LS.
And then I'll put a button on here, calculate worksheet.
Active worksheet.
Yep. So I'll say recalculate, and now I can open and close.
And then recalculate.
And then I can refresh it again. There's videos on this. For example, you can have expressions that change this to red and green and different colors depending on what the value is. But if you have expressions that do conditional formatting, sheet is what you need to use. The table won't work, but it will work in Publisher. What I'll do now is move to Scheduler. With Scheduler, you need at least 5 accounts. If you don't have at least 5 users, you can't use Scheduler because Scheduler is a very powerful tool. You can do email bursting, automation, and messages to Microsoft Teams, for example, webhooks, calling APIs. It does a lot. I'll just show you some simple examples. Here's some examples from the training videos where we have a number of actions. So the first action is we can save a published report as a PDF file. You saw that I was doing that designer tool where you could design graphs and tables. You could save this report as a PDF if you wanted to. So it's saving it as a PDF, and then down here we're sending an email. So to this address, sending this message, and you can put variables in here, and we're attaching the reports. So we're attaching a PDF, XLS. You can also automate Excel in here. There's those detached formulas that we were discussing in the first session. So this will recalculate the workbook, attach the formulas, and then attach it to the email. So that's a very simple example. And over here, you've got triggers, and you can say, let's do that every day or once a week, etc. A more complicated example would be this. So this one's using what we call query combinations. What it's doing is it runs a query, and it's getting all the companies, and then the budget owner or the person in charge of that company, accounts manager, is getting their email address. So what we're going to do is loop around, and for each company, we're going to execute a report, save it as a file, and then attach it to an email. So that's the loop. So that's going to repeat around and around, one for each company. So here's our published report, and we're just overriding the company. So we're getting the company from there, setting it here, saving it as a PDF, putting the company name in the file, and then when we come down to the email, we're using the email from here, get in there, and setting off the email. We're even using a HTML template to make the email body look pretty with logos and stuff like that, and attaching the email. So that's a simple example of email bursting. But there's, as I said previously, there's a lot of different actions in here. You can write JavaScript to talk to APIs, run SQL statements, command lines, do write backs, talk to message queues, send a message to Microsoft Teams, for example. You don't have to send emails. You could send a message to Microsoft Teams, and it has a link to the report that's in your channel. So here's some examples of schedulers sending out, say, when we do builds, we can send a message out to Teams and have a link to the build. But in the examples I was working on, I was just sending out a message, and then I had a link back to the age debtors report. So query combinations just said, oh, how many accounts do we have that are over 90 days, and are they over a certain amount? And if they are, we send a message to teams and have a link so that someone can follow up the aged debtors. So that the scheduling can be very conditional, not just every day, but if we have accounts that are 90 days overdue, then and only then send out the reports. Some of the things that I haven't spoken about are like reporting rows. Because we're limited on time, I just recommend you have a look at the videos on reporting rows. So they're very much about doing like profit and loss style reports in the web. So every row of a report has different criteria. So I'll just bring up a quick example. Profit and loss. This allows you to do a design. Here's the design. And what we're saying is we've got a section called expenses, and we're using all the accounts in this range, and then we'll expand them out. And then down here, we'll do a total, and it's from here to here. Very similar to what you saw with FRX in Dynamics GP. And then for a net profit is expenses minus GP. So the end result is that you can have a report in the web, and you can have like what makes up sales expenses. It's this account and this account, etc. And so you can build up quite a complicated report that's not just a listing, similar to Excel in a way, but when you're in the web, you don't have Excel, so you need reporting rows. I'll try and close up now with just explaining some of the things that I haven't mentioned. I haven't spoken about Foundry. Foundry is a development. Yes, it's a development tool, and what it allows you to do is create a database, load it with test data, creates a data model and a report pack. So an example of that would be this. So this whole project and the database and everything, the client said, oh, we want to do budgeting outside of systems, and we want cost centers, we want chart of accounts, of course, and then we want to have budgeting by period. So you can design the system, execute it, and Sharperlight will create the database, the report pack, the menus, the write backs, everything for you. Right? So
this is like a different database.
Yes.
Not the same database as Sun, right?
That's right. So if we look at the examples, so this is it here. We look at the templates. There's quite a few templates: project management and inventory, purchasing, multi-period budget example. So all you have to do is look at some of these examples, and what you can do is you can develop a project for a client. So they have Sun systems, but maybe they're doing Excel for project management or timesheets or expenses. You could use one of these templates or design your own. So if I looked at project, for example, here's our tables. We have category, employees, teams, and then we have projects. And then for projects, you just define what fields you want. So I want a project code, I want a status. So someone who's designing this, you could be a salesperson or someone with no SQL skills. Just define the fields you want. You can use Query Builder to load it with test data. So there's some test data. And just execute this. So I'm executing it. It's creating a data model. And basically you show it to client. They say, oh, look, we want to get more details on the employees. Can you add a few extra fields? And you do that. And once they're happy, you can then hand that over to them. That's just executed. It's created a database, data model, report pack, and everything. I don't want to look at the files. Let's just have a look at what it created then. So this is what it just created. So you just define the tables and fields, and then you get all this. Of course, you can modify this dashboard and change it to be what you want. It's created the menu, and let's have a look at some of this. So we'll look at teams. So it's loaded that up. There's your data entry form, or you can do it in a grid. So out of the box, you can develop a system quite quickly. Then use scheduler to maybe synchronize it with Sun. So maybe you do your budgeting here and then write it back to Sun. It allows users to move away from just doing things in Excel. The other thing I didn't talk about was instance management. When you install Sharperlight, usually you have one instance, but if the client is sophisticated, they might ask for UAT in dev environment. In here, you can create multiple instances of Sharperlight. Each one has its own connections and own database. So even though I've got one machine, I can have a UAT dev and then maybe production. And so each one is separate and they have their own connection details, and they can share databases, but I don't recommend it. And they appear as different instances here. This is used either because the client wants a testing environment or a training environment. They don't want training and writing back to live production. So you can create a new instance called training. It has a different link. The other one is multi-tenant in the cloud. So if you're hosting in the cloud, you can have, like extreme example, there's 100 instances in one box, and each one is for a different client. That's instance management. The other thing I didn't talk about was materialized queries. So you can create your own agile warehouses. The query that you define in Sharperlight can be stored as a materialized query. So just think of it as being warehousing, and you can join between the tables and enable them for write back. So if you had a ledger that had 100 million rows in it, because there's some big systems out there, you can consolidate that data into a materialized query and can query that to get your opening balances, and it'll be 100 times quicker. And then you can ask materialized query to maybe refresh every night. Right. So again, there's videos on that. The reason why you use materialized queries is to make things go faster, or it could be, for example, taking a historical snapshot. So like, what was the state of my business year end? Because as new transactions come in, you can't replicate the same numbers. So sometimes use materialized queries to take snapshots for historical reasons.
Is there still enough time to show us the installation process, maybe?
Okay, I'll do that now. So I'm just going to use a VM.
All right.
I recommend that you watch the video on installing an application server, because there's two sides to it. You need to set up the application server and then the client, so the client remote connects. I'll get the latest build. So I'll get the 64-bit build, which we discussed before. If you have a very old build, like a version 4, you may have to uninstall first. But when you install, it always keeps your connection details, so you don't worry about losing those. So I'm just going to run this install. So 64-bit, that's good. Just doing a prerequisites check. So we need .NET 4.6, go next. If it's the application server, you always go complete. If it's a client and you only want them to have remote connections, you select client only. So for app server, it's complete. For clients, it's that only. So I'm going to do complete. Now, I recommend that you don't change the default install location. We have some clients that say, oh, it has to be on D drive. That causes problems, because when you upgrade, you have to remember that you put it on D drive, and people forget, and then they install it again, and it goes on C drive, and then you get two installs, and it's terrible. So if you do change the default location, you have to remember and install back to that same location.
Right.
You can see I've got some data models here on the desktop, Sun Meta. So I would have went to the the Sharperlight website, data models, you would download that, which I put on here. Now notice that the installer says, oh, look, you've still got something running. So whenever you do an upgrade, which I'm doing, just make sure that you exit all your Sharperlight programs. So I've still got this running, which is not good. So I just need to stop that.
Sharperlight instance.
Okay, so I've created
the surface. Okay.
So I've stopped it. So when you do installs, to stop everything. You can't have it running. So, and that includes Excel. You can't have Excel open and using Sharperlight to close everything when you do install. Remember I said that Sharperlight has its own database called, and usually we call it Sharperlight. So clean install, just create a blank Sharperlight database. And when you connect to it, Sharperlight will create its tables inside there. So as long as it's got DBO access to its own database, it's fine. So you can see I've got some databases on here. One of them is called Sharperlight. But if I create a new one, Sharperlight FS, so that's blank.
Okay.
This is still going. Once this finishes, default you'll have no data models. So you would have your data model for Sun on your desktop like this, and you would use something called Data Model Installer to install it. Oh, good, it seems to be a little bit faster now. So just while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go in and delete Sun data model to show you what it's like. So these are the data models. They're just a single file. So I've just deleted Sun, so you can see what it looks like when we come in and there's no Sun. All right, so what we normally do next is you would come into here, Client Setup.
Client Setup.
And what you should have normally is just System here. All of these would be not on there. Because I've put them on there previously, I've got other systems, but you just only have System. Over here, you would create a blank database called Sharperlight. I think I called it Sharperlight FS in this case, but just call it Sharperlight. And if I test that and I have the right permissions, you should see that it'll detect that there's no tables in that database and it's totally blank. So it'll ask you if you want to initialize that database. So we'd say yes to that, and that would be it. So the next step is to get Sun systems in the list. So to do that, we go back to the main menu, and what we do now is select Data Model Installer. All right.
Data Model Installer, yeah.
And we could always copy the file to the right location, but Data Model Installer, what it does is it makes sure that you don't have Sharperlight running and you don't have Excel running, you don't have the service running. So it just does some basic checks because you don't want to have Sharperlight running while you're installing data models. Okay, so what we do is we click on Add, or maybe we click Update. I'll go to my desktop, select Sun Systems.
Standard meta.
Okay, so it's got this file in there now. So we go Finish, and what it'll do is compile them all. After you've compiled them, then when we go back into Client Setup, we can then define our connections. And now we have our Sun systems, and we can see what version it is here. So it's 8.14. That's an old version. And then we can put in our Sun database, our password, test the connection, and that's it. We can then go into Site Setup and start setting up our accounts. Remember, I chose a blank database, so this will be like a clean store. Admin's blank by default, and because it's so I've come in and then I can start adding accounts. So I go new user and add it. Trust my domain account, and then bring in a license, things like that we covered before. But with it, even without this, I can start doing reports. If I did, I'll just do query builder here, sign in as guest. And if I do Sun Systems and I put in the journal number, journal line, and because I'm in demo mode, I just get the first 99 records until that license has been applied. Okay, so that was a quick run through of a store. If you're a client, so let's imagine that you're a client. So this service here would be running on the server. And then from a client's point of view, their experience is a little bit different. They don't see local connections, they just see remote connections. So you would come over to here, something like this. You would enter the details for the server, maybe the server name. Okay, so in this case, I'm just connecting to myself, but you would do something like that. So maybe you connect to the main application server, you go yes, it just does a speed test, and then it enables it. So they won't see local connections at all. They'll just have something like that. They can connect to multiple remote servers, and if they do that, they just need an account in all of the servers. So if you connect John, for example, if you have John, the account in both servers, you can see both connections. If John is just in one server, you only connect to the one where your account's valid. Okay, questions?
So let's say we have a Sun Systems and we want to install Sharperlight. So we will install the Sharperlight in the application, in the Sun application server. Is that correct?
Yes, you can install it somewhere else if you want to, or as long as it has enough memory and is not resource starved. Sharperlight doesn't use too much CPU, but sometimes we put on boxes and it's always running at 100%. So Sharperlight gets no CPU. So as long as it's got enough, it's not overloaded. Best practice is on another server. So you have a dedicated server, but if they don't have that, you can put it on where Sun Systems is running.
Oh, okay, right.
But sometimes they complain because they say, oh, Sharperlight's slow, but then you look and then the application server is 99% running other tasks and no memory.
Okay, right. So it's better to have it installed in this different server, but you can also install it in application server if the resource is enough.
Yes,
correct.
Right? Yes, that is correct.
Okay.